The closest 7 jobs in line to the presidency, the winners are. But first, listen to this. They often jest that politics is merely show business for the less aesthetically inclined. So, without further ado, let's begin our list. The 7th in line for the presidency, none other than the Secretary of Homeland Security. Be careful, though, the title can be misleading. This role isn't about securing territories in some tabletop game like Risk. No, this is reality. The role encompasses a wide array of responsibilities, from immigration to cybersecurity, orchestrating disaster response, and of course, safeguarding the nation from threats. Truly a jack-of-all-trades role. Picture this. You're the superhero who must juggle managing hurricanes and combating hackers in a single day's work. So how long do you occupy this role? Quite simply, as long as you remain in the president's graces. But here's the kicker. The limit is, well, let's just say it's about how much one person can endure before going absolutely nuts. So, if you're someone who thrives under extreme pressure and multitasking, this could be your dream position. Or perhaps, it might turn out to be a nightmare masquerading as a daydream. Coming in at number 6 is the Secretary of the Treasury, basically the nation's top accountant, but with fancier suits. This is the person who gets to manage the country's money. Imagine dealing with trillions of dollars and still not being able to afford a decent coffee machine. Yeah, that's the life of the Secretary of the Treasury. Their job is all about taxes, economic policy, and trying to make sure the country doesn't go broke. The Secretary of the Treasury has to rub shoulders with the bigwigs at the Federal Reserve, the Internal Revenue Service, and the Treasury Department. They're also constantly engaging with other government offices, like the Office of Management and Budget and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The term length and limit are the same as the Secretary of Homeland Security. So there's no term limit, and they serve at the pleasure of the president, which is a fancy way of saying they can be fired at any time. So if you love numbers and don't mind being blamed for every economic hiccup, step right up. Halfway through our list at number 5 is the Secretary of State, because who wouldn't want to be the president's top advisor on international affairs? Now, this role is a little like being a world traveler, but with a twist. You'd be shaping foreign policy, smoothing ruffled feathers, and putting out international fires. It's a bit like being a global firefighter, only with fewer hoses and more treaties. You're the main point of contact for the United Nations and NATO, and a host of other international organizations. You're the face of the country abroad, which is a bit ironic, considering you'd spend so much time overseas, you might forget what your own country looks like. And let's not forget the term limits. You serve at the pleasure of the president, which means you can be in office as long as they are, or until they decide you've had enough globe-trotting. If you've always dreamed of jet lag and diplomatic immunity, this job has your name on it. At number 4, we have the President pro tempore of the Senate, the person who gets to play Senate leader when the vice president is busy. Now, you might be wondering, what does this fancy Latin title mean? Well, it translates to temporary president, but don't be fooled by the temporary part. This role carries a lot of weight. Imagine being the substitute teacher in the world's most powerful classroom. The President pro tempore presides over Senate sessions, ensures that the rules are followed, and casts a vote in case of a tie. They also have a hand in the legislative process, helping to shape laws that affect the lives of millions. And here's the kicker. They serve for 6 years, with no term limit. That's right, folks, it's a job for life, or until you get voted out. So if you fancy wielding a gavel and don't mind being the understudy, this job is for you. We're at the top 3 now. The Speaker of the House, the Vice President, and of course, the big cheese, the President. First up, we've got the Speaker of the House. Now, this job is kind of like being the school principal for a bunch of unruly teenagers. The Speaker's got to keep all the members of the House of Representatives in line. And let me tell you, with 435 of them, that's no small feat. It's kind of like trying to herd cats if those cats were also politicians. The Speaker sets the legislative agenda, decides who gets to talk and when, and generally tries to keep things from descending into total chaos. They can be re-elected every 2 years, but there's no term limit, so they could theoretically be playing cat herder forever. Next in line, we've got the Vice President. Now, this job is a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, you're one heartbeat away from the presidency, but on the other, you've got to spend a lot of time waiting in the wings. The vice president's main job is to be ready to step in if anything happens to the president. They're also the president of the Senate, but they only get to vote if there's a tie. So, it's a lot of sitting around and looking important with a side of tie-breaking. Like the president, the VP can only serve 2 terms, or 10 years if they've had to step in midterm. And finally, we've got the big cheese, the president. This job is kind of like being the CEO of America, Inc. You've got to manage a massive bureaucracy, deal with Congress, and represent the country to the rest of the world. Oh, and every decision you make is scrutinized by millions of people. It's a 4-year term, but you can be re-elected once. After 8 years, though, you've got to pack up and leave the Oval Office to the next person. Now, each of these jobs requires dealing with a whole bunch of other offices. The Speaker has to work with the majority and minority leaders of the House, the party whips, and all the committee chairs. The Vice President has to liaise with the Senate, the Cabinet, and of course, the President. And the President, well, they've got to work with everyone. Congress, the Cabinet, the Supreme Court, and not to mention all the foreign leaders out there. So there you have it, folks. The top 7 jobs in the US political system. Remember, it's all fun and games until someone loses an election. And that, folks, is the political ladder in the United States. From Homeland Security to the Oval Office, we've seen it all. The 7th step, the Secretary of Homeland Security, juggling national security and immigration issues. Then, the Secretary of the Treasury, handling our nation's coin and dealing with, well, everyone's money but their own. Moving up, we have the Secretary of State, doing their best to keep the peace, or at least appear like they are. The President pro tempore of the Senate, the oldest member playing the long game, literally. The Speaker of the House trying to keep all the kids, representatives, in line. The Vice President, always a bridesmaid, never a bride. And finally, the President, the big cheese, who has the joy of everyone's eyes on them all the time. So next time you're considering a career change, why not politics? You'll never be bored, that's for sure. And remember, in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.